Hey everybody, this is Adam Kokesh here in Lamy, New Mexico, just a little ways southeast of Santa Fe, and I'm here with the one and only Tom Hyland, who you may have heard of from his Right to Travel Civil Disobedience in an article that he wrote about 10 years ago, a long,
strange trip. I did borrow that from the Grateful Dead, but attempting to travel free in America is a strange trip to embark upon.
And we happen to be sitting in his home that he built himself out of bales of hay. That's right, we're in actually a straw bale home. And you might not know from looking at the beautiful decor that the walls here are actually made of straw bales, at least
straw
on this
bales
wing.
Over 2 feet thick, post and beam that holds up the roof. Like living in a thermos bottle. Very comfortable way to be.
And this was about a year-long project to build this original home here. He's got this huge wing going off in the other direction. It's a beautiful homestead here, if you can legally qualify it as such. But most importantly, Tom, what did you do to get government permission to build this building?
Well, what I didn't do was get government permission to build this building.
You didn't get government permission? You didn't get a permit? You didn't get building codes, inspections? You didn't do any of that?
No, I drew the sketches, and a friend of mine said, "Tom, I'm going to show you how to build a house." And I am also proficient with power tools, so he had faith I knew what I was doing. And I sketched up the plans on how to draw this place, how to build it, and we proceeded to build it. When the house became about 24 feet tall is when an inspector rolled up the driveway and asked me what I was doing. I said, "I'm building a house." And he said, "Yes, I've noticed that. You need a permit to do that." And I said, "I do not need a permit to do that." And he said, "Oh, yes, you do." And I gave him a letter that I wrote to the Director of Construction Industries Division of New Mexico, a letter that I had written 7 or 8 months earlier, in which I quoted the code itself. And it turns out that you, as an individual, if you are not involved in the business of building houses, are allowed to build your own single family dwelling or addition without a permit. And that inspector never returned. And I asked him, "Have you ever read the building code?" And he goes, "No." And I said, "How long have you been a building inspector?" And he goes, "About 10 years." I said, "You've never read the code?" "No." I said, "Well, here's an extra copy of this letter, and you read this," because he says, "I'm always getting harassed by my own construction industries inspectors. I have a ranch out there, by Roe Mesa." And so he, I think, was ultimately delighted to meet me. He didn't call me back and say thanks, but I never heard from him again.
But hey, you certainly made his job that much easier.
Well, yeah, he didn't have to come in and red tag me and pull me out of here in chains because he actually read the instructions. And the letter was written to his boss, and she never responded. And I'll give you a copy of that letter so you can read it for your own. It makes, it's about 2 pages long. But
and we'll be able to share this with you as well. Now, just to be clear, this is New Mexico state code for building that says if you're an individual, you're not a professional in the construction industry, you're allowed to build a residency on property that you own.
That is true.
Now, it's not true everywhere in the country.
Even if you own a farm or a ranch. In New Mexico, Construction Industries Division, it's called CID. And
that's a state government agency.
In New Mexico, if you are in the house building business, then you have to follow the line, you have to call in the inspectors, you have to fill out the permits, and you're building a house for somebody who doesn't know how to build a house.
Well, the silly thing is, even with that, there's an easy way around it. If you really wanted to avoid that, you could just say, well, hey, Mr. Construction Guy, I'm going to deed the land to you under contract temporarily, and you're going to build your residency, and then you're going to give it back to me. I mean, it's a really like a silly way of the government trying to control your property.
They make a lot of
you
money.
a renter.
They make a lot of money. I mean, they will tell you it's always about safety. Everything's about safety. And the, you're going to build this house to code and safe. Now, I own the house. I paid for it. There's no mortgage. And of course, I built this house to code.
Well, you paid for the property. You didn't have to pay for the house.
I paid for the ingredients that built it. So all the parts were paid for. And then I assembled the pieces. And the only thing that, the only permission that has to be asked, and this is because once a year I get a tax bill, a property tax bill in the mail. And this comes from the Santa Fe County Treasurer's Office. And it's a pretty hefty bill. I pay about $4,000 a year property tax
that goes to
for the privilege of living in my house. And they have a thing called land use department. And this Santa Fe County wants to see how I am going to use the land. And they insist that if you don't show us the plans and we don't allow us to approve them or disapprove them, we'll bulldoze whatever you have built. And we'll march you off the property at gunpoint. They don't mind telling you that. And so I have tried to perfect allodial title. And I don't know anyone who has ever done this. I've heard of rumors of this. I've read books about allodial title. I went through the entire procedure, and the treasurer at the time of Santa Fe County took my allodial title papers and crumpled them up in front of me and threw them into a trash can and told me I only have time to talk to people who love their country. And anyway, I don't get along too well with those folks, and I continue paying that tax bill every year under threat of being marched out of here at gunpoint.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
And what do they use that money for, Tom?
A lot of it goes, I hear, for schools. These schools...
Because you have, if you live here and you love your country, you have to care about the children, Tom.
Well, of course. It's all for their safety that they learn what we need them to know. And the major lesson that they learn in school is obey and don't question the teacher. So I just see, I have a really foul attitude about public schools, folks. Sorry about that. Government schools.
Public schools are great. You make school open to the public, that's awesome.
Yes.
But when you fund it by theft, maybe you introduce some problems in terms of reinforcing that racket. Now, Tom's lifestyle here and what you understand now of how we came to be here in this amazing home is really important. I think a lot of people miss that you can opt out of so much of the system if you simply point out, hey, look, I have this right, and you make yourself more trouble than you're worth. Essentially, they'll leave you alone. Not on the property tax in this case, but what Tom has done here is chosen a line for himself that he is going to walk, and he's stuck to it. And he's done it in another amazing way in terms of the right to travel. Now, when you understand what a racket government is and that borders are simply lines drawn on a map by politicians in circumstance of history, the whole concept of the government controlling the right to travel in any way seems really absurd. The fact that you need a driver's license, you need permission from the government to operate on the King's highways is really absurd. That you need to pay a registration to simply own a vehicle. And as Thomas pointed out, you don't really own it when you register a vehicle right?
The problem is we unwittingly, we hand over our title of origin. We go down to the motor vehicle department with this. If you've bought a brand new car, or even if you are financing it, you get a title of origin, and you go to the motor vehicle department and you hand this over, and they give you a fabricated document called a certificate of title. It might say state of New Mexico, state of California, state of whatever. It's a state of ignorance, and now you have a certificate that says that state they own your car, and you cement the deal with a driver's license in your wallet and a license plate on the back of your car and registration in your glove box. So the right to travel, which is a true reality on planet Earth since caveman walked from one cave to, Fred went to visit Barney, he was allowed to travel without asking for permission. And at the turn of the century, the early 1900s, when automobiles were in proliferation, at that time, there were some Supreme Court cases that defined accurately what is the difference between traveling in your private automobile and delivering goods and paying passengers for a living to their destination. What is the difference between commercial delivery and traveling in your car? And these Supreme Court cases have never been overruled. They still stand. Now, what happened was around the early 1920s or so, everybody's driving a black Model T. If you could have any color you wanted as long as it was black. And the local motor vehicle department said, hey, folks, would you like us, the cops, to help you find your stolen Model T? Why don't you put this plate on your car and put this little driver's license in your pocket, and if we find your stolen Model T, we'll call you up. And so people did this for free. At first it was for free. And then after about a year or two, they said, well, these plates are costing a lot of money. So they started charging people to doing it. And everybody thought they were supposed to register their cars and get driver's licenses. And this is how they were, and it was all about safety and all about, like, we'll find your car. So this is how it all began. It was deceptive, and it was not a nice thing to do.
And crazy how today it is so taken for granted. It's sort of an assumption. I mean, kids, when you turn 16, you don't even think about it. It's like, oh, good, now I get government permission to drive.
I get permission to drive. And see, the thing is, driving, if you look in the law books, the state code books, every state has almost the identical laws regarding driving. It says driving is the paid activity, the transportation of goods or paying passengers for a living. So in 2004, 11 years ago, I went to the Department of Motor Vehicles in Santa Fe, the head department, and I met with the head director of the department, and I had the book open on my lap, and I showed him the differences between what is a commercial driver and what is a traveler. Though they didn't have that in the book at this point. They don't tell you what a traveler is. All they do is define what is a driver. And I said, I'm not doing this. And he said, that's your opinion, sir. And I said, but if you look at the top of the page, Mr. Director, it says definitions. These are not opinions, these are definitions.
Well, it's also the opinion of the Supreme Court in this case.
Yes, and also there are still those Supreme Court cases that have never been overruled. So I closed my account at the Motor Vehicle Department, and the next day, and then I received a death threat. The next 24 hours after that, the first time in my life, the phone rang, and a man promising me death. And I could hear the sound of typewriters and noise and office clutter in the background. And I was wondering, is this coming from the Motor Vehicle Department? And I kept him on the phone long enough to annoy him, where he slammed the phone down on me. Because I was really wondering, should I pray to the Lord now? Anyway.
So this was just a bureaucrat who realized that you were, by doing what you were doing, essentially a threat to his entire source of income, right?
No one has ever gone into the Motor Vehicle Department headquarters and willingly turned over a pristine driver's license with no violations, no outstanding fines. Nothing. No one has ever closed their account at the Motor Vehicle Department. People go in there on their hands and knees begging to get their driver's license back. But nobody has ever gone in and said, I don't want this anymore. And I said, give me back my title of origin. And it got real quiet then, and they said, we don't think we have that anymore. So anyway, I went 3 years without a driver's license or a plate on my car or anything, except I ended up in jail. And after some of my very...
Well, hold on, you got to tell that story, because this was just for a night, you got arrested, you got processed, but what precipitated that?
Well, I got arrested for not having a driver's license almost immediately, and not having a plate. There was no plate on my car.
So you got pulled over?
I got pulled over, and there's no plate on my car, and this cop says, where's your credentials? And I told this lady where they went. And she calls in a supervisor, and I tell him where everything went, and they pulled my car up on a hoist and rolled it away and held it for ransom, and said, you're going to get a driver's license, registration, insurance, all of that stuff. I refused to do that, and by the time about a week or two later, I arrived in front of the Santa Fe County prosecutor, Art Michael was his name, and he was astounded. And he said, you are the first person who has ever come in here and done what you have done. May I shake your hand? And I said, okay. And I shook Mr. Michael's hand. And he said, amazing. And he dismissed all charges. A couple of...
Now, hold on, that didn't really get you out of your jam. He didn't give you your car back, right?
No, I had to... a whole month went by, and my car was locked up, and I wrote a couple of letters to a tow truck operator who was the classic stereotypical tow truck operator. He looked like a very dangerous man.
And I can tell you from my experience that I think what you mean by that is that they have a certain emotional detachment from what they're doing. Like the same way that cops and soldiers say they're just following orders, the tow truck operator who's really stealing people's property, whether it's righteous or not on behalf of someone else, has to be like, I'm just doing my job.
Well, picture you're driving up, you're towing people's cars away, and you're talking to people who are so bummed out beyond belief.
You're helping ruin people's lives.
So inconvenienced.
Yeah.
So devastated. And this is all you do is deal with these bummed out people every day, and the cops are your best friends.
Because they protect you.
Who's going to get called up next?
Yeah.
Like, God, I hope Officer O'Reilly calls me up. I need a tow job today. So this guy was professionally grumpy and menacing and snarling, and he had Rottweilers on the property. Everything you imagine a tow truck operator's living circumstances would be like. And I wrote him a couple of letters, and it was letter number 3 that he said, come and get your truck. And that was because I told him, I said, listen, pal, you have stolen my car. And I don't think the city of Santa Fe is going to hop on your rescue wagon and defend you in a court of law for what you have done.
And you showed him the record with Judge Michael.
And I told him that I don't have a driver's license. The facetious reasons why my car was stolen in the first place is they're trying to infer that I am a driver when I am not. And this blew the guy's mind.
Enough that he
called me up and says, get your car out of here. And I got my car out of there. And then but I had to buy another truck in the meantime. I bought some beater, but I was driving around in another pickup truck because I live way the hell out in the boonies. So, and then about a month or two later, identical circumstances, a state cop pulls me over because one of my headlights was out, and I knew it was out. And I was blinking brights off and on didn't want to hurt anybody's vision at night. And this cop gave me tickets for all the identical excuses once again. In the next month or two, I wrote.
But what happened? He handed you tickets and let you drive away.
But he let me drive away because it was about.
You didn't have a license plate.
I had no credentials whatsoever.
Did you tell him your name?
But I told him who I was.
You didn't give him your social security number or anything?
No.
So he just a name on a ticket.
But he saw that he probably found my name somewhere, and he knew this is that guy that gave up his driver's license.
Did you sign the tickets? Or did you refuse to sign them?
I did sign them, but with the typical,
it was like, what are you going to do to enforce them, right?
Well, it's 1 a.m, and he allowed me to drive home. I didn't.
Right. If you don't sign, then you're not consenting.
Then I'm going to be walking home in the dark, and there goes my truck back over to the tow truck operator again. So I'm driving home in my car, and then I wrote this cop a couple of letters, prepping him for his performance in court when he testifies against me. And I also called Art Michael as a protection witness to testify in court why he dismissed the identical charges against me. When I called in Art Michael as a witness, the judge recused herself from the case.
And nobody would hear it then, right?
No one wanted to hear the case. And the cop quit the police force. He became a security guard.
Now that might be the greatest accomplishment of this story. And as you know, we're generally safer without the police. And as we've pointed out in Sharpstown, Texas, they fired the police force and said, we're going to hire private security, and they had a 61% drop in crime. And this is why we're telling you now, if you see a cop, and Tom, that being confrontational or negative in your demeanor never helps in these situations, right? I mean, how would you describe when you're talking to either a judge or a bureaucrat or a cop? What's your attitude? What's your just conversational strategy?
I'm very relaxed. I'm always I even sometimes put my thumb on my wrist to feel my pulse. I just okay, I'm calm. And you have to be aware and also know the law. And I tell these directors at the motor vehicle department and these cops and these judges and these prosecuting attorneys what the law is, how I understand it, in a very calm voice.
And what we've been saying is that it would be really nice if every cop would quit their job. And we'd be so much safer. We wouldn't have government enforcers running around imposing these exploitive policies on us. And that's really an incredible thing that you confronted a cop in such a way that it led him to do that. Now he still wants to be a security provider, just not for the government.
Maybe he's doing that.
And so this is why we're saying from now on, if you see a cop on the street and you want to give a greeting, instead of flipping them off, instead of increasing the aggravation and entrenching that negativity, peace sign simply means we love you and we wish you'd quit your job. And Tom was someone who, with that demeanor of going in with peace, going in calm and simply assertive, he was able to actually get a cop to do that.
And it happened. And then the third incident was the cop who pulled me over after I was a block away from my car already, walking away. And he goes, hey, you don't have a seat, you weren't wearing a seatbelt. And I'm like, I'm already walking down the street. Isn't it kind of late to be discussing seatbelts when I'm a block away from my car? But I'm talking to this cop, and he detained me, and he wanted all of my credentials, and I told them where those credentials went so long ago, and he was on the radio, and then the lights went off, and he didn't even wave goodbye. He just drove away.
Oh crap, that's that Tom Highland guy.
And I'm just standing there alone now, feeling, is it something?
Am I still detained?
Is it something I said? So this was, anyway, I had a feeling that maybe I had something tangible, something real, something is happening here. What it is ain't exactly clear. But anyway, so
I think it's pretty clear, and I think this is the lesson that I really want to share with our audience. People who care about freedom. And this is a fun thing. I think a lot of people who are watching this right now might be thinking, well, geez, if everybody just did this, we could be rid of the entire government roads racket. And it's true. It really has that power. But even more importantly, as Thomas pointed out, you can live this way. And if you know what the risks are and you know what the rules are, you can live way more free and relate to the state as a free, beautiful, independent human being with inalienable rights. And sometimes when someone puts a gun to your head, if a mugger comes to you and puts a gun to your head, you're going to give him your wallet. But if you can talk him down and say, hey, how about I just give you $20 and you walk away, that's still a major achievement. And it comes by saying, you're a thief. This is invalid. And setting that premise as Tom has for himself so clearly from the beginning.
let it be known that I was the only man in New Mexico, I think, that did this. All of my friends were applauding. They thought it was really cool. They were cheering me on, but nobody gave up their driver's license. And I was just a pesky little gnat buzzing around that they were waiting to swat at the appropriate moment. I now, folks, I have a driver's license. I have a plate on my car because I was thrown in jail after I actually filed a case against the state of New Mexico, against the governor and the Supreme Court and about 35 individuals. And this case went down like a lead balloon. I was very naive to imagine that I could enter their little playroom and that I expect them to punish themselves. That they would go, my God, you're right, Tom. We are guilty of extortion and racketeering and car theft and all kinds of things. Here, have lots of money and we'll never do this again. Bam! No, they are not going to punish themselves. They laughed me out of the room. And about a week later, I was in jail. And the judge said, if you want to sit in jail for 3 months, that's fine. Enjoy yourself. Or I'll let you leave right now and you go down to the motor vehicle department and get a driver's license. And it was about the saddest day of my life, but I did that.
It's just the end of one road. And I've been in similar situations in my civil disobedience and getting in trouble. I've taken plea deals. You know how that works. And it's just the end of a beautiful road of rebellion and of really just asserting yourself. And I think this is another really important lesson for people to get out of this, is that it takes civil disobedience takes a certain commitment. And the stuff that I've done, you might see as, okay, Adam did this, it was performance art, he got arrested, he faced a charge, and it was done, chapter closed. And in a sense, it's a lot easier than what Tom has done in taking this on as a long-term project that lasted many years of saying, I have this right to travel, before finally saying, okay, I'm not going to fight that battle anymore. But he is still living a very deliberate, very free lifestyle out here. And there's an important lesson for people to be able to take from this, to say, I need to choose that line for myself and live better as a result. Now, Tom has decided that he's not going to fight that particular battle right now, but he's living here free on a home that he built with his own 2 hands, that he doesn't pay any licensing for or didn't get permission to build. And so he is able to take all of the lessons and all of that experience and say, this is how I'm going to live deliberately now. On top of that, everything that you did in that period kept not only proved a very valuable lesson for anybody who is ready to try this, or when we get to a critical mass of people who want to try this in an area or in a state like New Mexico with a relatively small population, where you can have an impact on state policy through civil disobedience, through that kind of, just making the racket too expensive for them. And you probably kept a lot of people from getting hurt during that time by simply distracting those assholes.
Well, absolutely, Adam. But the most sane activity that we can pursue is to educate people. And I wrote an article that is on the internet. You can go to Google.
We will include the link.
Okay, and type in Tom Highland story, Hyland. And there's this story I wrote because I wanted to educate the local area, Santa Fe. It was printed in 2 parts in a newspaper about what I'm going through, what I'm doing, and what I'd like to accomplish. I wanted people to be outraged and light torches and get pitchforks and walk to the courthouse.
But instead they cowered and looked up and were like, wow, I wish I could do that.
But it didn't help, except that the article has been spinning around the internet for over 10 years now.
And the significance of this, I think everybody who looks into right to travel And there are a lot of people doing different experiments with this, living different lifestyles, traveling in different ways. We have our own friend Mike Soffin in Florida, who drives a vehicle with his VIN covered up, with his license plate covered up. There are different ways to assert this, and I know that he's read that article. So a lot of people have been influenced by that and gotten that out there. So I encourage everybody to check it out, read the story, share it with people, and then maybe if it's right for you, there's a stand to be taken where you live.
Like I say, if 100 people went down to the motor vehicle
it was
department,
just 100 in New Mexico,
and closed their account at motor vehicle department, how about if 1,000 did it? Like I say, when hundreds and thousands of people say, hell no, we won't go, it's very interesting what could happen. And I was just one little guy trying to do this, but like I say, education. If the more people understand why this behavior occurs, why do we just robot-like go to the state and ask permission to travel? Think about it. Permission to travel? I'm going to get up and go to the bathroom. May I please go to the bathroom? This is ridiculous. You don't ask to go anywhere. You just go, if you harm no one. So here we are. Welcome to my house, and welcome to my world. Now, it's time for my boot heels to be wandering.
If it's possible in New Mexico, I understand there are probably a lot of people thinking, how do I do this? Is there a way you'd like for people to be able to reach you if they have further questions, or if they want to get together and maybe storm the DMV here in New Mexico?
If you find my article on the internet, then you will certainly find my phone number. And if you're interested enough to find the article and read this educational piece that I put together, it was a primer. I wrote this for folks who just didn't know this stuff. And if you find that article, you'll find my name, you'll find my number, and we can talk. I'm not shy.
Ladies and gentlemen, Tom Hyland and the Tom Hyland Lifestyle.